Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan. Well, farm election fever seems to have taken hold of politicians this week, with plenty of promises being made. One of the biggest commitments has been from Taoiseach of Radker, who told our editor Katrina Marcy that Fine Gael would use exchequer money in the event of a shortfall in CAP funding for Irish farmers.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with Irish farmers. It's going to be quite a battle. A lot of other countries in the European Union want to reduce the budget for CAP and put it into other areas that they consider to be more important. So it's going to be quite a battle to maintain the CAP budget. I'm up for that battle. I've learned a lot from the negotiations around Brexit. I have a very good team behind me, including people like Phil Hogan, Simon Coveney, Helen McEntee, and also I built up a lot of contacts in that period. And I want to use that political capital to fight for the CAP budget.
If it comes to it, will Fine Gael put national funding?
The short answer is yes, that we are willing to use national funding to top up the CAP budget if needs be, to make sure that we protect farm incomes and protect the rural economy. But the first priority has to be to try and make sure we get as big a CAP budget, as big a slice of that European pie for CAP as possible. And I honestly believe that that me as Taoiseach and the team I have behind me are the best people to fight for farmers and to fight for rural Ireland in those negotiations around the European table. Taoiseach
speaking out for Moymart earlier this week, perhaps not his natural habitat. But Radker also set out his post-Brexit priorities.
And if I have the privilege to be re-elected Taoiseach, there are really three things that I want to focus on doing for farmers as I represent the country abroad. The first is secure a trade deal with the United Kingdom post-Brexit, one that gives our farmers tariff-free, tax-free, quota-free access to the UK market, because so much of our exports go to the UK, particularly beef, cheese and mushrooms, very much dependent on the UK market, so we need that trade deal. The second is using my political capital and the contacts that I've built up over the past 2 years to fight for a good budget for CAP as part of the new EU 7-year budget, because CAP is actually absolutely essential to sustain farm incomes and our model of family farming here in Ireland. And thirdly is to make sure that any future trade deals that the European Union enters into give our farmers a level playing field and protect the environment. And that's going to be particularly relevant when it comes to trade deals like Mercosur, for example, but also potential future trade deals that could be done with the United States or with Australia or New Zealand. And we're going to insist that there's level playing field for farmers and that the environment is protected before we vote for any trade deal.
Tánaiste Simon Coveney was also at the Mart, and he reiterated what the Taoiseach had said in an interview with our CEO, Justin McCarthy.
Tánaiste, we heard the Taoiseach giving a commitment earlier in relation to obviously fighting hard to maintain the CAP budget. I think my colleague Katrina Marcy asked him in relation to if that's not maintained, would the Fine Gael government top up that budget with national exchequer funding? I think the Taoiseach gave a very strong reassurance. Is that your view?
It is. So we. And people would expect this from Fine Gael, I think, but we will prioritise agriculture in every budget, and that's what we've been doing through the difficult years over the last 9 years. And we will do that through fighting for the protection of the CAP budget, essentially. But also, if the CAP budget doesn't give agriculture what we regard as the supports it needs, well then we will of course look to top that up, and I think there will be the flexibility in the new CAP to be able to do that. Certainly Phil Hogan, when he was there, signalled that. So I mean, make no mistake, I meant it when I said agriculture is a big priority for this party. It should be, because it's the heartbeat of most rural communities.
So to give farmers the confidence, if CAP budget isn't maintained and the Commission's 5% cut goes ahead under a Fine Gael-led government, that will be supported through national exchequer funds.
Well, I mean, we'll have to actually look at what the figures are, and obviously factor that into budget arithmetic. But certainly there is an openness in Fine Gael to put more exchequer money into to compensate if necessary for not getting a sufficient CAP budget.
Obviously, Tánaiste, you've led the charge on Brexit from a government point of view. We heard in terms of trade and we no tariffs, no quotas are the objective. But you'd have to be very concerned about reports coming from the the UK
London.
Cabinet over the weekend in relation to divergence from standards, mounting a parallel trade agreement between the US and Europe at the same time. We are 11 months away. Are you more concerned now than you were at any point in this Brexit negotiation that we could potentially be heading for a hard Brexit, which Minister Creed has told farmers would cost them €1.7 billion?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, we've successfully managed to protect Ireland through the first phase of Brexit, which was about focusing on getting a withdrawal agreement in place, protecting a peace process, preventing border infrastructure on the island, which also is hugely important for agriculture, by the way, in terms of moving animals and so on. And we managed to get that done against the odds. Most people felt that it wasn't going to happen, and we succeeded. In my view, we can use the same team to succeed in the second half of this challenge. Which is to get a trade deal in place that's good for Irish farmers, good for Irish agriculture and the food industry as a whole. Farmers don't need me to tell them that we sell, in and around €5 billion worth of food and drink each year to the UK. That is a huge part of our agri-food exports, particularly in beef.
Are you concerned that farmers know that? And as you say, what happens in 11 months' time? And if we take the Chancellor of the Exchequer's comments made at the weekend in the Financial Times to be where we end up, we are going to end up in a very difficult position.
No, well, what the Chancellor of the Exchequer said, that there wouldn't be full alignment with the EU single market.
And does that sit comfortable?
In other words,
with you?
just let me develop that point. What he's saying there is that Britain isn't going to be a rule taker from a single market that it's not part of. And while I hear what he's saying, the truth is that there won't be a trade deal that is quota-free and tariff-free unless there's a level playing field in terms of how product is produced in the UK versus how it's produced in the rest of the EU. The EU will never allow a situation where we allow the UK to develop a competitive advantage for itself by driving down the cost of production, by deregulating, and then selling freely into the EU single market. I don't think Irish farmers would see that as fair. And I don't think that manufacturing industries across the EU would accept it either. So what's needed here is a sensible deal that allows for tariff-free and quota-free trade both ways between the UK and the EU. In order to make that happen, there needs to be a very clear level playing field. That needs to be protected by a disputes resolution mechanism. It needs to be monitored in a way that gives confidence to both sides. And I believe we can negotiate that.
Is there anything you can negotiate to protect the value of the UK market, Taoiseach? Because you're right, in trade tariffs and quotas are one element of it, but if Irish product is sitting on a retail shelf beside British, Brazilian, USA, whatnot, there is a huge devaluation.
Well, I mean, if it's sitting next to US product that doesn't comply with EU standards, then we have a big problem. Because if we have hormone beef and GM beef coming into the UK, then there is going to be barriers between the UK and the EU in terms of trade, because for pies and for all sorts of the other processed products that come from the UK into Ireland and elsewhere, we won't be able to trust the provenance of where that product is coming from. So, the UK understand that. They understand the rules of trade. They understand how the EU works. They've been part of the EU for over 45 years. So there's no secrets here. And so regardless of what the Chancellor of the Exchequer says, the negotiating teams and the Prime Minister's office will understand only too well the rules of engagement to get a fair trade deal for both sides. So my job, if I have the opportunity to do it, is to make sure that Ireland's interests are protected in those negotiations. That's why I was with Michel Barnier yesterday. That's why he's coming to Ireland in the not too distant future. And I believe that the Fine Gael-led team that have delivered a successful outcome to protect Ireland in the first round of Brexit are best placed to deliver a good outcome for farming and for agriculture in the context of a trade deal.
Did Michel Barnier and yourself have a conversation about the financial package that may be required, Tánaiste, if what we talk about doesn't happen and if we end up in a no-deal Brexit scenario at the end?
No, I mean, he doesn't control that. I mean, what we focused on was getting a good deal, which is what we've focused on for the last 2 years in terms of the withdrawal agreement, and we successfully concluded that. And in my view, we will successfully conclude a good deal on trade as well. But there's going to be real bumps along the way. I think this is going to be a difficult negotiation. I think there'll be tension, there'll be grandstanding. Unfortunately, some of the lessons of the first round of Brexit negotiation don't seem to have been learnt. But it is in the best interests of Britain and of the EU to get a sensible deal by the end of this year on trade. And I believe that Ireland will be central to that. And I hope people will trust an experienced team that have done a good job in the first round of Brexit to get it done.
Thomas, the final question just on Mercosur, and you mentioned standards. Are you comfortable with the Mercosur trade deal, given that Brazil deforested 1 million hectares of Amazon rainforest last year in terms of equivalent of standards? And if you're not convinced, will Ireland use its veto in blocking a Mercosur trade deal?
Look, the straight answer to that is I'm not comfortable with it. I don't think that's any secret. I think the Taoiseach has outlined that view as well. He's said that we will undertake a detailed, economic impact of Mercosur in terms of study to really understand the consequences potentially for Ireland of this. But I mean, what I'd say on Mercosur is there's a long, long way to go here in terms of the European Parliament's views, in terms of individual member states' views. Much of it linked to climate and climate action. While there may have been agreements in principle around Mercosur, there is a long way to go in terms of this debate, and that deal is a long way from being ratified.
Tánaiste, we're in the heart of Cork here, dairy country. Under a Fine Gael-led government, will there be any quotas, environmental quotas introduced for dairy?
No, look, I mean, I'm the minister that actually did away with dairy quotas. I stand over that. That doesn't mean that I'm not determined to work with farmers to make sure that we make a transition to proof of sustainability, if you like, of that growth story in the dairy sector. Agriculture, like every other sector in Ireland, needs to show that it's sustainable from a climate perspective, from an environmental perspective. We have a plan to do that. We've worked with farming organisations and with Teagasc. That's factored into our national climate action plan. And Ireland, I think, is going to be one of the countries in the world that can show that we can produce more food, but we can do it with a reduced carbon footprint. And I think that farmers are up for that. And unlike other parties who blame farmers in the context of the climate debate, we listen to them, we work with them, and we help them make the changes and the transition that they need to make.
But you can't foresee in the next 5-year life term of the next government dairy farmers being faced with quotas preventing them from seizing the opportunity?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there will be restrictions that won't be imposed by regulation, but they will be natural restrictions, because you can only grow to such a capacity given the resources that you work with, and at the same time protect the soil, protect the environment, and ensure that you have the right animal husbandry and animal welfare standards that are expected of the CAP. So there are natural limits that most dairy farmers can grow to. Some of them have already reached those limits. Others, I think, deserve the opportunity to get there. But that journey has got to be sustainable, and we've got to scientifically show that it is sustainable. And I think, I was the minister that set up the Dairy Sustainability Scheme, which farmers bought into in huge numbers. And I think if we work with farmers, show them the respect of people that work with the environment every day, we can make significant progress in terms of the climate challenge within agriculture, just like we need to do in other sectors like transport and energy.
On Tánaiste there. Minister Creed was also on home soil in Cork at Fermoy Mart and pledged that there would be a new beef regulator.
You've announced this morning as part of the Fine Gael policy that you want to implement a regulator. Can you tell farmers a little bit more about that, how it will work and what effect it will have for them?
Well, I think the impact it would have is a regulator overseeing the beef industry would be able to determine, whether the industry is operating in collusion to the detriment of farmers' interests. And that's in effect what a properly constituted regulator for the beef sector would do. I don't propose to go over the criticisms that have been levelled at the Competition Authority. The Competition Authority functions across a whole range of areas, and I think giving specific focus to a regulator for the beef sector is overdue. We've been out in public consultation on this. There appears to be, from the preliminary assessment of submissions, widespread support for the idea. It's something that we, would see as a bolt-on to the Unfair Trading Practices Directive, which we're transposing into Irish law anyway between my own department and the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. But this is an additional power. The Unfair Trading Practices, is important in itself and I think can contribute also. But I think a properly constituted, sufficiently empowered regulator that will be able to oversee the beef industry is overdue, and I think here is the opportunity now in the context of this legislation.
And what powers would you see the regulator having?
Well, look, probably similar to the powers that the Competition Authority has, but with specific focus.
Okay.
Specific focus. So they can. The allegations that are levied at the door of the industry regularly are that there's collusion and price fixing, that farmers aren't getting a fair price. Let's give a dedicated authority the powers to investigate those and the sanction to apply where they uncover people breaking the law.
I think that would be very welcomed by farmers. The election notwithstanding, how long of a process do you see that taking to be set up?
In a way, this is something we have been, we put this out, in terms of the public consultation on the unfair trading practices. We specifically inserted a request in there, which is additional to UTP. We could transpose the UTP directive without in any way going near a regulator, but we wanted, because it's related, we wanted specifically to gauge what the view was in terms of having a dedicated regulator for the sector. And so we've been at this before elections and before others came onto the pitch, and they're all welcome if we're going in the same direction. I don't underestimate how long it takes to kind of transpose directives or indeed to draft legislation, but I think this would be, similar to the law under which the Competition Authority is established, but with specific focus, so I don't think it should take that long.
Okay. And would that regulator have power over the retailers as well as the beef factories and the meat factories, apologies?
Well, look, I don't want to go into the prescriptive detail now, because obviously, in terms of drafting legislation, there's a lot of consultation that has to take place with legal directives and to see what's existing in terms of the function of the Competition Authority that might rightly migrate across to a regulator for the beef sector. But I'm sure we can get it done pretty promptly.
Okay. Thanks, Minister.
Taoiseach promises to top up cap money for farmers. In this week's Irish Farmers Journal, we reveal Leo Varadkar's pledge to top up any cap shortfalls with national funding. Beef regulator with real teeth promised. 50% extra capacity for export of dairy calves. EPA calls for increased farm inspections. HSA plans 300 inspections in livestock-focused blitz. Plus, you can't afford to miss this week's massive 14-page focus on preparing for calving. Inside this week's Irish Farmers Journal, on sale today.
Aside from the election, farmers are of course concerned with beef prices. Adam Woods was in Elphin Mart on Monday night and he spoke to Mart manager Jerry Conlon about the Mart trade, elections and Green Party proposals.
Jerry, you had a good end to your cows tonight. Some great cows out there, Charlie cows, Limousine cows, a good cow, a great trade. What over the last couple of weeks was this since Christmas? The trade is starting to pick up again.
Yeah, the trade for the dry cows has picked up very, very well since before Christmas. We had a very strong trade this evening. We had 52 suckler or dry cows and 51 got sold, and some of them made well over €2 a kilo.
Well, is it feeder men is buying them, or is it, we'll say, factory men, factory agents?
Factory agents, the factory man that was buying a lot of them tonight.
Okay.
A few of them went to the factory, and some of them went to be bought for further feeding to Northern Ireland.
Okay. Are you seeing much of an appetite coming from Northern Ireland? There's a few going every night.
A touch starting to ring up about sales coming in February now, and we're hoping that we will get maybe some man to come over from England for that February sale as well, that for the special heifer sale on the 5th of February, and the bullocks on the 12th.
How many heifers you reckon you've been here for 5th of February?
We're hoping up with about 800 to 900 heifers.
Big show of heifers. I was just talking to a few farmers out there tonight. I suppose you're in the heart of suckling country here. There's politicians knocking on doors at the moment. What's the big issue around the town of Elphin or even the county of Roscommon when a politician knocks on the door here at the minute?
Well, when a politician comes to the door, for the last 4 or 5 years, the politicians have done nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. and I mean nothing to try and help the West of Ireland, the farming in the West of Ireland. It's going to die if this government doesn't change things. And I support whatever party gets in, but we need to try and do something about the suckler cow and try and keep it in the West of Ireland, because if we don't, the mares won't be able to survive. The people that was buying the good store cattle from up the country and the good weanings from up the country, they won't be here for them to buy them. And the quality of stock, if we're depending on going back to the dairy stock, the people around here are not prepared to buy suck cows from the south and rear them up here.
You could have a chance of a Green Party forming a minority partner in a government in 3 weeks' time. I asked farmers the other night, and the reception wasn't good in town, but what your own opinion will say of a Green Party coalition with a major party like Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil? What do you think that will say for Roscommon? What would that mean?
Oh my God, for the West of Ireland, it would be a disaster. I wouldn't want to see that happen in this government, new government being formed.
Well, Adam was busy this week. He also spoke to Fiona Dunn about the new ICBF BOW index, what it's about and how it could affect farmers in the future.
I'm here with Fiona Dunn, who is a PhD student working with Dunnaberry in Teagasc Moor Park. Fiona or Fiona? Fiona, okay.
Yeah.
Fiona, tell me a little bit of your work. So there's a really interesting presentation made here today on something called BOW, Beef's Own Worth.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about it.
So the Beef's Own Worth is an index to help select or to help assist in purchasing and selling animals that are destined for slaughter. So it's not like a breeding index where you're choosing superior parents to breed better progeny. It's being able to identify animals that will that ranks animals based on their predicted carcass revenue.
So what sort of figures are you feeding into that index in terms of making up that BOW index?
Yeah, so normally a breeding index only includes the animal's genetic merit and their genes that they will pass on to their progeny. But this, we actually include the whole animal's genetic merit. So the genes that they've gotten from their parents. Then we also include their crossbreeding effects. So sometimes crossbred animals will end up with heavier carcass weights. We include the dam effect, so what dam parity or dam age the mother was, because younger dams tend to have lighter progeny for carcass weight. So this is included in the beef's animal's own value. And we also include their gender effects and whether or not, say, the animal was a twin.
So you've got a lot of suckler farmers around the country who are really interested maybe in rearing some dairy calves as an alternative enterprise on their farm. Do you think, I suppose at the moment they're asking themselves the question, how do I know, if I go into a mart and look at 20 calves all aged 3 weeks old, how do I know which one of these calves is going to do well, or I haven't got a lot of information on those. So do you see that would be a tool for that farmer to purchase those calves? And if it is going to be a tool, how will the farmer be able to see that BOW index on that animal? Could it be that it'd be up on a mark board in the future in terms of that index on that animal?
Yes, so this is exactly where we see it kind of coming in. So at the minute, Dr. Margaret Keller was talking in her presentation, and she said that nearly 250,000 calves are sold before 6 weeks, and at that stage you can't tell what kind of conformation the animal is or how it's going to finish to do with carcass revenue. So this gives an indication of the value of the animal when it comes to finishing it, and it just gives more power in the decision-making process then for the purchaser. And even for the likes of a dairy farmer using the dairy beef index, they can try breed animals that are going to have a higher BOW, beef's own worth value, and then it all feeds in to the finishing system.
So we'll say if I buy 20 calves and I take them home and inside 2 months I weigh them and I input that weight into the ICBF database, will that, we'll say, updated weight go into that index, or how often will that index be updated on the ICBF database? Do you think, how often could it be updated?
Yeah, so while I was researching this, we added in live weights on a validation population as they came available. So the idea is this index isn't just going to be for young calves, it's going to be for animals throughout their lives, and that way herd owners can put in live weights, and then this is only in a pilot scheme at the minute, but the thoughts are when it is implemented, individual herd owners can put in live weight phenotypes, and then once the genetic evaluations are rerun, so when they're published again, the index values will be updated with the new information that's included.
So that's Fiona Dunn speaking to the Irish Farmers Journal at the ICBF Beef and Sheep Genetics Conference in Laois. Thanks very much, Fiona.
Thank you.
Adam Woods with that report there. And that's it for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email podcast@farmersjournal.ie. I'm Hannah Quinn-Mulligan, and the sound engineer this week is Ferdia Mooney.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes and Spotify every Wednesday.